Hello comrades and welcome to Pandemic Sewing 101 video number 12. This is the final video in the series. Yay! On your sampler you will find a label. Every single garment that the costume shop sends out on stage has a label of some kind in it. This large format SUNY Fredonia label is what we put in most main body garments like shirts, skirts, jackets, etc. And so it's really important to know how to sew it in. The stitch we're going to use is the whip stitch from the very beginning of this experience. And you're going to treat this edge of the label just like you did the hem of the garment when you were learning the whip stitch. If you're right-handed, you're going to start in the top right corner. If you're left-handed, you'll be starting in the top left corner. And what you're going to do, please zoom, Toby, is you're going to initially start from the back side of the label and you're going to poke your needle through so that your knot is caught on the label. You're going to travel about 3/8 of an inch, catch a few threads of your main fabric, and then go right into the label like you did when you were doing your whip stitch. And then you're going to travel another 3/8 of an inch and do the same thing. Catch a few threads of your fashion fabric and go into the label like you did when you were doing the whip stitch. Now you're going to find that it's a lot harder to convince your needle to go into the label than it was to get it to go into the fabric. And so the way you can get around that is when you're going into the fabric and taking your few threads, you want your needle kind of parallel to the fabric so that it's easier to get just a few threads. But then when you go into the label, sort of bend it up so you're stabbing straight into the label like that. You're not trying to hit the label at an angle, and that'll make it easier to stab the needle through. And you're just going to repeat that motion all the way across the top of the label. So if you're doing it correctly, you're going to have these dashed lines on the front and itty bitty, almost invisible dots on the back. Pause. So when you get all the way across the top of your label, you're going to knot it off like we've knotted off all of our other steps. Now sometimes this is all we need to do is just sew across the top of the label. But if it's near the edge of a garment, I like to tack down the bottom of the label as well so that it doesn't flip up and show. So I'm going to show you how to do a tack in each corner of the bottom of the label. It starts just the same as your whip stitch. So you're going to go behind the label, and then you're going to take a tiny little bite of the fabric and go into the label just like as if you were doing a whip stitch. And then you're going to do the same thing about 3 times in roughly the same spot. So what you end up with is like 3 tiny little whip stitches on the front and a couple of tiny little dots on the back. And so you're going to do that in the bottom right and the bottom left corner. Pause. So you've tacked down one corner, you've tacked down the next, knot it off like you've knotted off everything else so far. Cut your thread, and you can zoom out. And you have successfully completed your sampler for Sewing 101, or Theater and Dance 101. Congratulations!